Hello and welcome to Facebook Live and the summary portion of the 7 pillars for success in Love, Marriage, and Life series. I have so enjoyed sharing these principles with you. Um, when Jesse and I pulled these together, we called them pillars because we thought about the columns of a building that keeps that building um, held upright. And those pillars have to be strong. And so each one of those 7 pillars that I've shared over the past 7 weeks are really fundamentals or maybe universal principles to consider in keeping your relationship, keeping your love alive, and keeping your marriage strong. And so this time, I'm going to put it all together for you, and I'm going to give you information about how you can apply these 7 pillars in your relationship. Each time that we met, at the end of each segment or each part of the series, I gave some food for thought kind of questions. Well, I'm going to pull those together as well to support that next step in terms of sharing with you about how I can support you in implementing these pillars. So, I want to start off with a story, a story of a couple that I'm calling them Ted and Tina. Now, if there's a Ted and Tina out in the audience listening, I'm not talking about you because I haven't met you. I'm talking about a couple that represents um, the principles or tying this together that I'm going to share with you. So I'm calling them Ted and Tina. So I'm not talking about you if there is a couple named Ted and Tina. So Ted and Tina, they have been married for 26 years. They have 3 children. One is in high school, one is a junior in college, and the other is a college graduate. Now, over the years, Ted and Tina they've enjoyed a lot of of connections together. I mean, they raised a family together. They're happy about the direction that their boys are going in. They're both successful in their careers. And they also have a fun social life. However, they also have a place where they get stuck, where they wind up in arguments. And it's the same argument that they've had since the beginning of their marriage. Can you imagine arguing about the same thing over and over? Well, many couples do. So, one thing in particular that they argued about was money. She's a spender and he's a saver. Now, even though they have differences about money, they were able to finance um, having a successful life together. They were successful in getting their children taking care of their financial needs, and so forth. However, in the process, they had these arguments. And so, what happened for them is in the heat of the moment, he would criticize her spending, and she would insult him for being a penny pincher. And she thought of other derogatory things to say as well. Both of them tend to hit below the belt. So afterwards, they felt upset, they were angry. Sometimes, when cooler heads prevailed, they would have a sense of forgiveness. Not always, but sometimes they would forgive each other and they would promise to make amends. Well, that held until the last argument when Ted would open up a bill or see a bill on his computer that um, where Tina spent more money than they had agreed on. So they took they took the seven pillars series and they took it seriously. They watched all seven. And after they did, they said, I think Ted said it first. It's like, you know what? We've got to stop this. I mean, we have so much going for ourselves, but we just can't get past this. And so he said, enough already. Let's do something about it. He said, let's go ahead and try to talk about the questions that were at the end of each segment for each of the seven pillars. And so Tina agreed, and they did just that. So they put down, they recorded on a scale of 1 to 10 where they were with each one of these pillars. Um, and they put them all together to see where they were. They were so disappointed. They were disappointed in themselves, and they were disappointed in each other. Now, their arguments about money affected all of the pillars. It affected how they talked to each other. Um, they didn't have empathy for each other. They were not respectful to each other. Um, they didn't get to a place of intimacy, as I shared about how important it is to have this part of intimacy would be emotional intimacy. Um, they they did do forgiveness sometimes, um, but it didn't. They couldn't sustain it. And now the integrity part, they would tell their truth, which was based on misinterpretations, assumptions, and misunderstandings. So they both scored themselves low on that as well. They, in terms of commitment, even though they wanted to turn things around and start the arguments, they tried and they tried and they tried, but they would get into an argument and then they would go back to their old way of coping and attacking each other. And so their connection was low. Now, in this particular area, since they didn't have that on track, it affected all the other parts of their relationship as well. I mean, some of the times when they were looking forward to having a good time with each other, if they were still upset, angry, or frustrated about the money situation, it just kind of took the air out of the kind of experience that they were looking forward to having together. So they said, you know, let's give this a try. Let's try to fix this. So they did try on their own. They tried to change how they talked about money, but they kept getting triggered. They didn't know that what was keeping them stuck was that unconsciously, well, maybe consciously too, but mostly unconsciously, they were misinterpreting and misunderstanding what the other person was saying because they were paying attention to nonverbal cues. They were paying attention to each other's facial expressions. So if somebody is frowning, there is no way that they are conveying the message that I want to work this through respectfully and with integrity. So they looked at the facial expressions. They were paying attention to their gestures, tone of voice, in addition to the words and the behavior. And so they got stuck because they didn't know how to shift beyond that. So here's something else that was going on unconsciously um, with the misinterpretations. So Tina was thinking, see, he's just trying to control me. And Ted was thinking, she's trying to hurt me. And then Tina was also thinking, you know, this is pretty scary. He's pretty scary when he gets upset like this. And Ted was thinking, now they didn't say this. Well, sometimes they would say it out loud. You know, you're just trying to manipulate me. So, in other words, what they were thinking, and sometimes saying to each other, was that even though they didn't use these words, they were saying that they didn't feel safe. So what did they do? They went into survival mode. And that's what most people do when they're not feeling emotionally safe, when they're trying to have a conversation. And that's why they got stuck over and over and over and over again. Um, so when they thought about change, because they knew that something had to change, but the problem was their focus was on the other person changing. Ted was focused on thinking things would be okay if she would just stop insulting me. Tina was thinking things would be okay if he would stop criticizing me. Um, so they didn't know how to get past that. They didn't understand that the key to turning things around was that each person had to make a change. And one of the ways to consider changing was for both of them to think about, okay, so what is it that the other person wants? Now, maybe they're not saying it properly. Maybe they're not saying it in a positive way. Um, so maybe Tina started thinking, or she was presented with the idea, um, what about stopping the criticism? Um, Ted had an opportunity to start thinking about, what about me stopping the insults? And so they thought, okay, so how do I do that? How do I do that? So the first thing that they needed to do was to think about what I call, um, throughout my lifetime, I was taught the golden rule, and it works in so many situations. However, in a situation like this, it doesn't, when people have differences and they have different needs. And so they were introduced to what I call, actually, I learned it in the Imago training that I had, that Jesse and I had. Um, they learned the platinum rule: do unto others as they would like to be done unto. And so um, Tina didn't want to be criticized, and Ted did not want to be insulted. So they started there. And since they did that, then they were able to prepare themselves. They weren't ready to do it yet, but to prepare themselves for the conversation that they could have with more empathy, respect, intimacy, forgiveness, integrity, commitment, so that they could strengthen their connection. So, what did they do? Because they tried everything that they could on their own. It's so interesting to me that I see so many people who have tried things and and they're not successful with it. They'll say, I tried everything and nothing worked. Well, everything that they tried didn't work. And so Ted and Tina realized, well, maybe there's another way. Maybe there's another way. Because if I'm going to give, Tina saying, if I'm going to give Ted what he wants, then how am I going to do that? And Ted asked the same question for Tina. And so what they discovered, because they stayed with this seven pillars process, because they found it very helpful to them, they said, so how do I prepare myself for this? So they took a challenge. They took what I'm calling a communication detox challenge. And so, what is it that they discovered during the detox challenge? Well, the first thing they discovered was how to calm down. Because when people get flustered, they try to have a conversation in the heat of the moment. And of course, they're going to say and do things that they can't take back later. So they learned how to, in preparation for having the dialogue and the conversation, to work through their differences about money. They discovered that they needed to calm down, and they needed to have a way to do that. And once calmed down, the second thing they discovered they needed to be prepared to do was to prepare what it is that they were going to say so that they could talk about their differences without criticism, without insults, and without hitting below the belt. Um, they did not know how to do that. And then the third thing that they were open to doing was to prepare themselves to convey their message in a way that the other person could hear, because both of them had something valuable to say about their values, about um, spending and saving money. So this was not about right or wrong, good or bad. This is about two different people who valued um, what is it called, being a steward of money in different ways. Ted was more of a steward than Tina was, but that's not right or wrong, good or bad. That was just one of her values. So they made the decision and they took the challenge. And so this is what happened. They went to work. They went to work and they walked through the steps of managing their emotions, getting their thoughts cleared to prepare their message, and then also to send the message in a way that they could be heard and understood. They were really happy that they took that step. They were really happy that they took the step. So, what happened after they got to work? So, this was like 3 days. 3 days. They did the exercises, they followed through on the exercises. They felt really good about it. Now, they weren't ready to talk, they were prepared to talk, and they had good feelings about that. And so, like I said earlier, they were now prepared to go into the conversation. And that would be like a next step, but you have to start somewhere. So, with the good feelings that Ted and Tina had about taking these three steps over these 3 days, think about what that could be like for you. If you had a way to turn your arguments around, what if you joined the 3 day challenge to it's the beginning of starting arguments and being prepared to communicate. Um, I'm offering a 3 day free communication detox challenge. It starts Monday, August the 15th through Wednesday, August the 17th. And then, I thought about after having the experience of applying all three of these steps, then it wouldn't hurt to have questions. So I'm offering a bonus day on Thursday for questions and answers. Um, you will have the opportunity to do the same thing that Ted and Tina do. Day one, you will discover five things that you can do to calm down. It's not always easy to do. And the other part is that in the heat of the moment, many times people don't want to do it. They don't want to do it because they're invested in getting their point across. They're invested in winning the argument. So, day one, you'll have five things that you can do as an option because you can keep doing what you were doing, but you don't have to. So, this gives you option number one. So, option number two is on day two, and that is you will be introduced to 5 ways to prepare, to prepare to be heard and understood by your partner. And day three, you will be introduced to 3 powerful ways to, it says, to put the love back, to invite the love back. There's a very specific way that you can do that. So, what would happen if you had that in place for you and the two of you were prepared to have the conversation so that instead of arguing, you would have a dialogue. You would have a conversation that respected each other's points of view, that would respect and understand each other's needs beneath the surface, that would support the two of you feel closer together. And what I know about problem solving over all these years working with um, couples and also being in a relationship myself, is that when you can have a safe conversation, when you can talk in a way that you can hear each other, something beautiful happens. The problem, and for Ted and Tina, the problem can either be dissolved just by talking through it. Well, Ted and Tina needed more than that, or it can be resolved, or if it can't be dissolved or resolved, it can be managed. You can come up with a way to manage the problem. But before you can do those steps, these three steps are in place. So I invite you to join me. Um, the best way to join the challenge is to go to the link. There's a link on the page, and I think it's going to be in the chat box too. There's a link for you to go to the page to sign up. Remember, it's totally free, and I am so excited about providing this opportunity because I personally know what happens when anybody puts themselves in a place where they're preparing to have those important, difficult, and sensitive conversations. So I'm looking forward to you joining me, and I thank you. I thank you for joining me for this summary, pulling it together, seven pillars, because I know that when you have these pillars in balance and strong in your relationship, you are putting yourself in a position to have more and more of the relationship of your dreams. And so join me Monday through Thursday, really, and let's get to work. Thank you for joining me. Take care.